Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Priyanka Neela Krishnan Show with me, Priyanka Neela Krishnan. I am an enterprise data security product leader, author, and speaker. Some of my books include Autonomous Data Security, Jailbreaking LLMs, and Problem Pioneering. This is Enterprise Security Series, episode 54, and today's topic: your machines are talking and someone is listening. This is a show where security and business leaders get a clear read on enterprise data risk. My standing note first: this is my independent commentary, my own views, not tied to any employer, product, or vendor. And today, we are talking about the traffic you never see. Most of what moves through your organization is not people clicking buttons. It is machines talking to machines over APIs, exchanging your data constantly in the background. That conversation is the engine of a modern business. And as of this year, it is also the number one attack surface. Over the next 15 minutes, I'll show you why the attack moved from the web application to the API behind it. Why so much of your API surface is invisible even to you, and how to defend the conversation your machines are having. Let's get into it. All right. Most of the traffic in your organization is not people clicking buttons. It is machines talking to machines over APIs, exchanging your data constantly in the background at a scale no human sees. That conversation is the real engine of a modern business. It is also, as of this year 2026, the number one attack surface. And a lot of it is happening through connections nobody documented. And I am Priyanka Neela Krishnan. Let us talk about the conversation your machines are having and who else is listening in. Let me reframe how you picture your own traffic, because the mental image most people carry is out of date. When we think about our systems, we picture users, people logging in, clicking buttons, filling forms. But that is a small slice of what is actually happening. The overwhelming majority of traffic in a modern organization is machines talking to machines over APIs. Application programming interfaces are the connective tissue of everything digital. Your mobile application talking to your backend, your systems exchanging data with a partner, one microservice calling another microservice, your AI tools reaching into your data. All of that flows over APIs constantly in the background, moving your sensitive data at a scale and speed no human ever directly absorbs. And here is the consequence that defines this episode. Attackers follow the data. For years, they focused on web application, the login page, the human-facing surface. But the data increasingly does not travel through the front end anymore. It travels through the APIs behind it. So that is where the attackers went. The machine-to-machine conversation that powers your business has quietly become the primary place your data is exposed. And the primary place it gets stolen. It is invisible to most of your monitoring, which was built to watch users, and it is enormous. Your machines are having a constant conversation about your most sensitive data, and someone is increasingly listening in on it. Let me contrast where our attention goes with where the attack actually happens. On the left is where we look. the web application, the login page, the human facing front end. This is what our security testing focuses on, what our monitoring watches, and what most of our tools were built to protect. Because for a long time, that is where users and therefore risk lived. On the right is where the attack actually is on now. The API behind that front end, the machine interface that actually moves the data. And there are three things about that API that make it dangerous. First, it is often undocumented, which means security may not even know it exists, let alone be protecting it. Second, it frequently has like a weak authorization, meaning it does not properly check whether the caller is allowed to access the specific data being requested, which is the single most common and most damaging API flaw. And third, it is often unwatched because monitoring built for human web traffic does not naturally cover machine to machine API calls. So you have a situation where the front door, the web application, is well guarded and well lit, while the service entrance, the API, is often unmapped, poorly locked, and dark. Attackers are not sentimental. They go to the service entrance. The gap between the left column and the right column is precisely the gap attackers have learned to exploit. And it is why API security has become its own urgent discipline. Here's the number that declares the shift complete. According to Akamai's 2026 State of the Internet report, 87% of organizations suffered an API security incident in 2025. And Akamai went further, stating plainly that APIs have officially become the primary attack surface for enterprises. Not web applications, not network infrastructure, APIs. Let that reset your priorities. If you are like most organizations, your security program was architected around protecting web applications and networks because that is where the threat was when the program was built. But the threat moved, and it moved decisively. Nearly 9 in 10 organizations got hit through their APIs in a single year. That is not an emerging risk to keep an eye on. It is the dominant one right now. And the reason it climbed so fast is a combination of factors. APIs exploded in number as everything became connected and API driven. AI accelerated that explosion, both by generating more APIs and by making attacks cheaper and faster to run at scale. And the security largely did not keep up because the discipline and tooling for API security is younger and less mature than what we have for web or network. So you have a surface that grew enormously, that carries your most sensitive data, and that most programs are under-equipped to defend. That is exactly the condition that produces an 87% incident rate. The attack surface changed underneath us, and the numbers are telling us to catch up. Two numbers that show both the base and the payload of the shift. First, the average organization now faces 258 API attacks per day, more than double the year before, 113% increase. So this is not occasional probing, it is sustained daily barrage against your API surface, and it is accelerating so fast driven in large part by automation and AI that make these campaigns cheap, repeatable, and quick to launch. Second, this is the one that should really land. 43% of the vulnerabilities on the authoritative catalog of actively exploited flaws are now API related. Nearly half of what attackers are actively exploiting in the wild targets, APIs. And the leading cause by a wide margin is broken authorization. That means the API fails to properly check whether the specific caller is allowed to access the specific data they are requesting. It is a mundane sounding flaw, but it is devastating because it lets an attacker who can reach the API simply ask for the data that is not theirs and get it. Some of the largest data exposures of recent years came down to exactly this. An API that handed over millions of records because it never properly checked authorization. But the two numbers together, a relentless daily volume of attacks aimed at a surface where nearly half of actively exploited vulnerabilities now live. Exploiting a flaw as basic as failing to check who is asking, that is a lot of pressure on a surface most programs are still learning to defend. So, here is the reframe, and it connects straight back to the theme running through this entire arc. You cannot protect an API you have not documented. The first and most important API security problem is not some sophisticated attack technique. It is an inventory problem. In most organizations, APIs proliferate faster than anyone tracks them. Developers stand up new endpoints to ship features. Old versions of APIs get left running after they are supposedly retired. Integrations create endpoints nobody catalogs. The result is what practitioners call shadow APIs and zombie APIs. Undocumented and forgotten endpoints that security does not know exist. And in many enterprises, shadow APIs make up a significant fraction of the total API inventory. These are the open windows behind your locked front door. You can invest heavily in securing the APIs you know about, and it does nothing for the ones you have never mapped. Because you cannot apply a control to an endpoint you cannot see. This is the same lesson from the very first episode of this arc about dark data, and from the SaaS episode about shadow apps. The pattern keeps repeating because it keeps being true. Visibility is the foundation. Before you can secure your API surface, you have to know what your API surface actually is. And most organizations, if they're honest, cannot produce a complete current list of their own APIs. That inventory gap is not a detail. It is the first and largest hole in your defense. And closing it is where API security actually begins. 3 moves for your Monday. First, discover your API. This has to come first for the reason we just covered. Find all of them, including the shadow endpoints nobody documented, the zombie APIs from projects that ended, and the old versions still quietly running alongside the current ones. You cannot secure what you have not inventoried, and your current list is almost certainly incomplete. Continuous API discovery is the foundation everything else stands on. Second, fix broken authorization first. Since broken authorization is the leading cause of API breaches, make it your priority. Test every endpoint with a simple, ruthless question. If I am authenticated as a user, can I request another user's data and get it? Far too often, the answer is yes, because the API checks that you are logged in, but never checks that the specific data you asked for is actually yours to see. Find those and fix them before anything more exotic. Third, watch API behavior, not just the perimeter. Traditional perimeter monitoring does not understand API abuse because a data scraping attack often looks like a series of perfectly valid requests. So monitor how your APIs are actually being used. Unusual access patterns, a single caller pulling far more data than normal, systematic enumeration, these are your early warning that an attack is in progress. Discover the surface, fix the authorization, watch the behavior. That is the practical core of defending the conversation your machines are having. Let me close by naming the shift underneath everything we have talked about because it is bigger than APIs. The perimeter moved. For a long time, security had a clear edge to defend, a boundary between inside and outside, and we built our defenses along it. But your data does not mostly travel through a well-defined friend door anymore. It travels through APIs, thousands of small machine-to-machine connections, each one an endpoint, each one a place your data flows out and in. The perimeter is no longer a wall. It is every endpoint your machines expose to talk to each other and to the outside world. And that is a fundamentally larger and more distributed thing to defend than the old boundary ever was. So the work is to defend your data where it actually flows now, which means treating your API surface as the primary attack surface it has become, not as a technical afterthought behind the web application. And it starts, as it always does on this show, with visibility. Inventory the conversation your machines are having. Know every endpoint, what data it exposes, and whether it properly checks who is asking, because that conversation is happening right now at enormous scale, carrying your most sensitive data, whether or not you're listening to it. The only question is whether you map it and defend it first, or whether an attacker maps it for you and joins the conversation uninvited. Inventory it before someone else does. This is the source slide. I'll hold it briefly for you to skim through and we'll get going. Alright, this was episode 54, the line to carry. The perimeter has moved. It is now every endpoint your machines expose. And APIs are the number one attack surface. You cannot protect an API you have not documented. So, discovery comes first. Then fix broken authorization. And then watch how your APIs actually behave. If this was useful, please do subscribe and share it with your engineering and platform teams. And tell me in the comments whether your team could produce a complete current list of your APIs today. If not, that gap is where I would start. I am Priyanka Neela Krishnan, Enterprise Data Security Product Leader, author and speaker. Couple of my recent books include Autonomous Data Security, and the second book is Jailbreaking LLMs. This is my independent commentary on enterprise data security, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe, stay secure, be happy. Bye, everybody.